I found out about her betrayal not from her words or tears. She was let down by math. There's a certain stillness that comes just before dawn, when the world exhales and everything seems suspended in time. That's when I usually wake. Habit, I guess, from years of early meetings and morning jogs that eventually gave way to slower starts and quiet coffee rituals. But lately, the stillness doesn't feel so peaceful. It feels off, like the air is holding its breath. That morning, it was just after 4 a.m. when I stirred. I didn't sit up right away, just lay there listening. The room was dim, painted in shadows cast by the streetlight leaking through the curtains. I turned slightly, careful not to disturb Natalie. She was lying on her side, back to me, breathing in that rhythmic way that told me she was still awake, even though her body was motionless. Her hand, as if on instinct, reached out and found mine beneath the blanket. Fingers brushed, then laced. It was warm, familiar, but also strangely hollow. We've been married 10 years. 10 years. That's over 3,600 days, countless dinners, arguments, reconciliations, vacations, hospital visits, birthdays, lazy Sundays, and sleepless nights. I knew the way she sipped her coffee. 2 sugars, no cream. How she curled into herself when she watched sad movies, and how her voice tightened ever so slightly when she lied about how much she spent on new shoes. I thought I knew her. Every line in her face, every shade of green in her eyes, every breath. But lately, something had shifted. Something so small, so subtle, you'd miss it unless you were looking. The first thing I noticed was how she started initiating intimacy more often. Not that I was complaining at first. It was just different, urgent almost, like she was trying to drown out a noise only she could hear. It wasn't about closeness, it was about distraction. Her touch was hungry, sure, but lacked warmth. Afterward, she'd lie still, staring up at the ceiling, the silence between us too sharp. Not even the soft hum of the fan could dull it. Then there was her smile. Natalie has this crooked little smile when she's genuinely amused. The left side of her lip curves just a fraction higher than the right. I used to joke that it was the only imperfection in her otherwise symmetrical face, and she'd laugh, rolling her eyes, swatting at me. But now, when I make jokes, sometimes even the ones I know used to make her laugh until she snorted, she gives me a different kind of smile. Polite, mechanical, the kind you give a stranger who tells you something mildly embarrassing at a party. And her eyes never joined in. I remember one night, maybe a week before that early morning, we were lying in bed watching some old movie she used to love. I can't even remember the plot anymore. I only remember looking at her and feeling like I was sitting next to a woman made of glass. I could see through her, but I couldn't reach her. She laughed at the punchline, but it sounded rehearsed. She curled into me, like always, but she felt like someone pretending to be Natalie. Like a cover version of the song I used to know by heart. It's strange how you can live with someone for years and miss the moment when they start pulling away. Like a boat slowly drifting from the dock. You don't feel the distance until the rope is slack and the water's between you. Back in the darkness of our room, her hand still rested in mine. She let out a quiet sigh, and I could almost feel her muscles softening, surrendering to sleep. I didn't move. I just watched her. The way her lashes fluttered slightly, the subtle twitch in her cheek. The moonlight, silver and thin, caught in her hair. She was beautiful, still was. But even beauty can't hide the tension underneath the surface. There was something about the way she held herself, even in sleep, tense, guarded like someone preparing for impact. I don't think she even knew I'd woken. I turned my head and stared up at the ceiling, mimicking her stillness. The quiet was pressing in on me, thick with the kind of weight that doesn't belong in a bedroom. I started mentally cataloging things. It's a habit I have, breaking things down, searching for patterns, data points. It's what I do in my work and honestly what I do in life. The human brain is built for pattern recognition, and mine has always been just a little too good at it. And lately, the patterns weren't adding up. She'd become more careful with her phone. always face down. Notifications silenced. A new passcode she hadn't bothered to tell me about. The grocery trips that used to be casual, unhurried, had become strangely efficient. She was always gone the same amount of time, 47 minutes, give or take. I joked once that she must have found a portal to another dimension with cheaper produce. She laughed, but again, only with her mouth. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was just the ebb and flow of long-term marriage, the natural shifts that happen when people grow and stretch. Maybe she was going through something. Stress, hormones, a midlife shadow creeping in. But maybe it was something else. The thought crept in like a spider behind the drywall. Unseen, but making its presence felt. I didn't want to believe it. I didn't even want to say the word, not even in my own mind. Infidelity. There. I thought it, and it felt like saying a curse. I turned my head slightly again to look at her. Her breathing had deepened. She was asleep now. Her hand had gone slack in mine. I wanted to shake the thought away, push it back into the dark corners of my mind where all the intrusive thoughts live. But I couldn't, because once you notice a crack in something, no matter how small, you start seeing it everywhere. You press your thumb to it, you tap along the edges. You test it. I didn't know what I was looking for yet. I didn't even know if I wanted to find it. But I could feel it, the shift in the air, the calm before the storm. And somewhere deep inside, I knew the storm was coming. But I also knew this. I wouldn't act impulsively. I wouldn't confront her without knowing for sure. No accusations. No scenes. Just observation. Patience. Like any good investigator, I'd wait. Watch. Listen. I rolled back onto my back, eyes open, heart slow and steady. The ceiling above me was just ceiling, but in that moment, it felt like a blank screen onto which my doubts were starting to project themselves. Natalie shifted slightly beside me, murmured something incoherent, then settled again. I squeezed her hand gently. She didn't squeeze back, and I lay there, still and quiet, staring into the dark, wondering just how well I really knew the woman beside me. I didn't know what I was looking for, but when I found it, I wished I had never seen it. They say once doubt takes root, it doesn't stop growing. It spreads, slowly at first, like moss in the cracks of stone, until suddenly it's everywhere. I told myself I wouldn't act impulsively, and I didn't. For a while. But suspicion is a restless thing. It doesn't sleep when you do. It sits up in the dark beside you, whispering. It was the following Thursday. She had just left for one of her now clockwork grocery runs. I glanced at the wall clock, 10:13 a.m. I knew, almost with certainty, that she'd be back by 11 o'clock. 47 minutes, almost to the second, every time. No matter what she said she was buying, no matter the traffic. It wasn't just strange. It was designed. I sat at my desk, tried to focus on a report for a client, but I couldn't keep my eyes off the corner of the screen where my network activity monitor sat open. I started checking it regularly, not for work, but for something else. Something hidden. I've always kept our home network tight. Secured. Monitored. It was second nature, part of what I do. But a few days ago, I noticed something, a device ID I didn't recognize. It came online only when Natalie was home. The MAC address wasn't tied to her phone, her tablet, her laptop. It was cloaked under a generic manufacturer label. And the bandwidth usage, it was too consistent. Precise. That morning, as soon as she left, I dug in. I traced the activity to an odd background process. Encrypted traffic tunneled through a virtual private server based in Oslo. Nothing was being downloaded or streamed. It was surveillance software. Sophisticated stuff, meant to avoid detection. Audio packets, intermittent camera pings. Some of it bounced back from inside the house. Our living room, the master bedroom. My hands went cold. This wasn't the kind of thing someone stumbles across on accident. This was intentional. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was that I hadn't installed it. I leaned back in my chair, every nerve buzzing. I suddenly felt like a stranger in my own home. At 10:59, I heard the garage door groan. She was home, right on time. Grocery bags shuffled. The sound of the fridge opening. Then Natalie's voice, cheerful, calling up the stairs. Got your favorite coffee blend, babe? I forced a smile into my voice. You're too good to me. She laughed, but again, only with her mouth. That evening, while Natalie was in the bath, I went to the laundry room under the guise of checking the dryer. That's where she kept her yoga bag, stuffed behind a bin of towels, near the shelves she always insisted were too cluttered. I opened the bag, careful not to disturb the order. Leggings, a roll mat, a water bottle, the usual. But under the towel, there it was. An old Android phone. I stared at it for a full 30 seconds before touching it, my mind already racing. Natalie hadn't owned an Android since before our second anniversary. We had matching iPhones now. This was deliberate. Hidden. It powered on. No SIM. Just Wi-Fi. A lock screen greeted me. 4 digits. I tried her birthday. Nothing. My birthday. Still nothing. Then I remembered, years ago, she used to use our anniversary date for everything. I tried 0614. Unlocked. My throat tightened as I thumbed through the apps. There wasn't much. Stripped down interface. But there was a secure messaging app installed. Encrypted. Not one of the mainstream ones. Something discreet, masked behind a generic icon labeled Notes. It asked for a password. I didn't know it. I sat there, the heat from the dryer making my skin itch, the weight of that phone burning in my palm. I didn't want to jump to conclusions. But it was hard not to when the evidence kept slapping me in the face like cold water. Surveillance software. Secret device. Timed absences. The increasing emotional detachment. Her hunger at night. Like she was trying to rewrite her guilt with the language of skin and sweat. I left the phone where I found it and quietly shut the bag. That night, after she'd fallen asleep, I retrieved the phone again. This time I took it downstairs, connected it to a cloned hotspot I controlled, and ran a brute force decryptor I'd built years ago for a client security audit. I told myself I wasn't violating anything. I told myself this was my marriage on the line. I needed to know. It took 3.5 hours. At 3:47 a.m., the message thread opened. The contact name was saved as EC. The most recent message read, Red dress. Nothing underneath. Same spot. 11:15 sharp. Underscore. My chest felt like it was wrapped in barbed wire. I scrolled further. There were weeks' worth of messages. Some flirty. Some explicit. Some painfully intimate. Private jokes. Personal nicknames. Emotional confessions. They hadn't just slept together. They talked. They shared things. My things. Our life. There was a message from Natalie, dated 2 days ago. I think he suspects something. He's been quieter lately. Please be careful. I set the phone down on the desk and stared at it like it might explode. She was talking about me. The next morning, I watched Natalie from across the kitchen as she poured coffee into her mug. She was humming. Something soft. Off-key. Her hair was tied up in a lazy bun, wisps falling around her cheeks. She looked the same. She looked so normal. And that's what made it worse. She looked up at me and smiled. What? She asked, grinning. I shook my head. Just thinking about how lucky I am, I said. She came over and kissed my cheek. Don't get too soft on me, she teased. I laughed. It sounded real. I made it sound real. But inside, something had fractured. I could feel the separation between what I knew and what she thought I knew widening like a canyon. She didn't know. Not yet. And now I did. It's a strange thing, realizing that the person you built your world around has been building a secret one just a few feet from yours. Every shared laugh, every cup of tea brought without asking, every late-night cuddle, suddenly felt laced with performance. I went upstairs after breakfast, closed the door to my office, and sat in the quiet. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I didn't even pace. I just sat there, staring at nothing, feeling the gravity of the moment settle in my chest like wet cement. This wasn't suspicion anymore. This was proof. I knew her secret, and she didn't know I knew. There's a moment, right after the truth sinks in, when you expect rage to take over. That primal, red-hot fury you always imagine accompanies betrayal. But for me, there was no fire. Only cold. Not the kind of cold that comes from grief or loss or heartbreak. This was surgical, clean, focused. I didn't scream, didn't smash things. I sat in my office, staring at the decrypted message history between Natalie and a man I had never met, but already despised with a clarity that shocked me. EC. The initials meant nothing at first, but names have a way of surfacing when you start digging, and I knew just the person to help me dig deeper. Marcus owed me a favor, a big one. I'd helped him out of a messy legal bind a couple years back, discreet data extraction for a case that would have cost him everything. Since then, we kept in loose touch. He had contacts in every shadowed corner of the city, cybersecurity, corporate surveillance, even a few folks who blur the lines between legal and illegal. The kind of people who could find anyone, anything. I called him just after sunrise. Marcus, I said quietly, as if speaking too loudly would make it more real. I need information on someone. Ethan Cole. A pause. Then a sharp inhale. That the name you're dropping this early in the morning? All right, I'll make it quick. What's the context? He's seeing my wife, I said flatly. I want everything. I'll pull every string I've got, he said. Give me 48 hours. The wait was harder than I expected. Natalie moved through the house like nothing had changed. She smiled, joked, touched me with that same borrowed affection she'd adopted in recent months. I watched her like someone watching a dreamer sleepwalk near a cliff. No awareness of how close they are to the edge. On the second morning, at 5:14 a.m., Marcus's encrypted file dropped into my inbox. The subject line read, Ethan Cole, complete profile. I opened it. Name, Colton Alexander Hayes. DOB, April 8th, 1986. Occupation, Regional Sales Director, Venatech Corporation. Divorced. No children. Lives alone. Gym rat. Spotless social media. Keeps a clean digital trail. Mostly. But he wasn't careful enough. Marcus had dug into Colton's secondary communication channels. Apps used by people who didn't want to be found, payment methods that bypass standard banks, hotel reservations made under burner accounts. Natalie's name showed up in 2 of them. Encrypted chats, time-stamped locations. A pattern that mirrored the exact windows of her grocery trips. It was all there. But one entry made my breath catch. Upcoming meeting, Amici, Friday, 11:15 a.m. Message, wear the red dress. Nothing underneath. I want to taste you before we finish our wine. I didn't blink. I didn't move. I simply reached across my desk and pulled up the security feed for our bedroom. She was there, in front of the mirror, twirling. The red dress. It was silk, tight. Natalie had worn it only once before, our 9th anniversary. I remembered every inch of that night. The way the fabric clung to her curves, how she'd shivered when I unzipped it. I thought it had meant something to her. I was wrong. In the mirror, she smiled faintly as she adjusted the straps. That same smile that hadn't reached her eyes in weeks. I watched her while she prepared to betray me. Again, but I didn't feel rage. I felt ready. Amici was a sleek little Italian place tucked into a block of glass and stone modernity. White tablecloths, curated wine pairings, chefs who treated their risottos like sacred rituals. Natalie loved it. We'd celebrated her promotion there 3 years ago. I parked 2 blocks away. No rush. I wanted to arrive exactly 1 minute late. Enough time for her to get comfortable, to feel safe. I walked in at 11:16. The host greeted me. I ignored him and scanned the room. There they were. Table near the window. Colton's back to me. Natalie facing forward. Mid-laugh, leaning in just a bit too far, the way she used to lean toward me. And yes, the red dress. My dress. I walked to the table slowly, deliberately, each step a nail in the coffin of our old life. Natalie looked up. She froze. Her smile collapsed. Her spine straightened. Her lips parted, but no words came out. Colton turned, confused. I didn't speak. Not yet. I let the silence work. Let the weight of the moment settle around them like fog. Then I leaned slightly toward Natalie and said, "You look beautiful, sweetheart." The way her face drained of color. I'll remember that forever. Colton stood. "Can I help you?" he asked, trying for polite, failing miserably. I looked at him like he was an insect I hadn't expected to find under a rock. "Don't worry, Colton. I know everything," I said calmly. "Every message, every hotel, every grocery trip." Natalie's hand trembled as she reached for her water glass. "You should go," I told him, eyes still locked on hers. "Unless you want this to turn into a scene neither of us can walk away from." He hesitated, then bolted. No fight, no defense. He left his wine half-finished. Natalie sat there, staring at me like I was someone she'd never met. And maybe in that moment I pulled out the chair across from her and sat down. "I didn't come to yell," I said. "I didn't come to beg." She whispered, "How long have you known?" "A while," I replied. "Long enough to give you every chance to come clean." Tears welled in her eyes, but I didn't feel moved by them. I'd seen enough crocodile tears in the messages she'd sent Colton. "I need you to get up now," I said. "You're going home. Alone. I'll meet you there." Natalie opened her mouth as if to speak, then closed it. She rose, shaky, and walked past me like someone heading to their own execution. I sat for a few more minutes, watching the street, listening to the silver clink of cutlery. The waiter hovered nearby, awkward, unsure whether to approach. Then I stood, buttoned my coat, and walked out into the bright afternoon. She thought that was the worst. She didn't know that I would say the most painful things without crying, and not in public. The worst part about betrayal isn't the lie itself, it's the quiet. The slow, creeping silence that fills the spaces where trust used to live. Natalie's heels clicked softly against the tile as I stood, motionless, beside the restaurant table. Her posture was rigid, her expression somewhere between disbelief and dread. I could see it on her face. This wasn't how she imagined it ending. Not like this. I didn't say a word as I followed her through the maze of white linen tables. She turned once, unsure where I was leading her, but I just nodded toward the corridor by the restrooms. She hesitated, then obeyed. The hallway was empty, just dim sconces and a faint echo of jazz bleeding from the speakers above. I opened the women's restroom door, checked it was empty, and motioned for her to enter. She did without protest. Once inside, she turned to face me, wet-eyed, cheeks flushed. "Please, just let me explain." I didn't speak. Instead, I stepped forward, my expression unreadable, and gently took hold of the hem of her red dress. Her eyes widened, but she didn't stop me. She just stood there, lips trembling, while I lifted it, not with anger, but with the quiet need for confirmation. No lingerie, just skin. She turned her head away in shame, biting her lip to stop the sob, threatening to break free. I let the fabric fall back into place. "Go home," I said, my voice low, controlled. "Wait for me there." "Please," she started. "Don't speak," I said, not cruel but firm. "Just go." She nodded, tears spilling over as she slipped past me, heels clicking again on the cold tile floor. The restroom door shut softly behind her. I stood in that room for a full minute, staring at the mirror. My own reflection didn't look familiar. There was a hollowness around my eyes. Something lost. Something burned out. Then I walked out, heart steady, toward the front of the restaurant. Colton hadn't gotten far. He was standing outside, phone in hand, pacing near a parked Tesla like he was contemplating vanishing into it. He looked up as I approached, his jaw tensing. "Look, man," he started. "Don't," I cut in. He shut his mouth, but I could see the flicker of defiance. The arrogance. I recognized it. I'd seen it before in boardrooms, in backroom deals. Men who thought they could take what wasn't theirs because no one ever held them accountable. I stepped closer. "Colton Alexander Hayes," I began. "Born April 8th, divorced twice. Most recent separation finalized 18 months ago. No kids. Venatech Regional Director. Makes 140 base, plus commission. Lives in that glass box condo off Lakeview with a view of the lake, but no soul inside it. His eyebrows raised slightly. You work out 6 days a week. You rotate dating apps under aliases. Alex H. is a favorite. You like brunettes, married ones in particular. You prefer hotel rooms with corner windows. You keep a burner phone hidden in your office safe, and your meetings with Natalie conveniently align with your quarterly territory reviews in this district. His face had gone pale by the time I stopped. I leaned in, voice lower now. If you ever come near her again, if I even hear your name, I'll make it my personal mission to shred your life into unusable pieces. Professionally, legally, socially. I'll start with your job, then your reputation, then your finances. I won't use fists, Colton. I'll use facts. I'll use silence. And you won't even see it coming until you're standing in the ashes wondering what happened. He opened his mouth again, then shut it. I turned and walked away without another word. The drive home was long, not because of traffic, but because I took the long route. I wasn't ready to see her yet. I wasn't even sure I could. When I finally walked through the front door, the house was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that presses in on you, like the walls are listening. Natalie was in the kitchen. She was still wearing the red dress, but she'd pulled her hair down. Her mascara was smudged, her cheeks blotchy. She sat at the island with a mug in her hands, coffee from the smell of it. It had gone cold. She didn't look up when I entered. I didn't speak. I walked in, set my keys down on the counter, and leaned against the opposite wall. For a few moments, we just existed in the same space, breathing the same air, feeling like strangers in our own home. Finally, she spoke. Her voice was barely above a whisper. I didn't know how to stop. I didn't respond. I never planned for it to go this far, she continued. It just happened. And then I kept going because I didn't want to feel invisible anymore. Her hands shook slightly as she brought the mug to her lips. She didn't drink, just held it there. I stayed silent. Say something, she pleaded, her voice cracking. So I did. This, I said, motioning between us, is not something words can fix. Her tears returned, quiet and heavy. She didn't argue. I looked at her for a long time. I tried to remember what it felt like to love her without question. I tried to remember the last time I believed her without doubt. I couldn't. I don't know what happens next, I admitted. I'll do anything, she whispered. Anything you need me to do. I nodded slowly. Then we'll talk tomorrow. Not tonight. She wiped at her face, a silent agreement. I walked past her, climbed the stairs, and closed the bedroom door behind me. I didn't sleep. I just lay there, listening to the quiet sobs rising from the kitchen below. Some things, once broken, don't go back to how they were. Even if you glue every shard together, the lines will always show. But sometimes, the shape that forms after the break is stronger than what came before. I didn't know yet which one we would be, but I knew this. Nothing between us would ever be the same. The next morning, the house felt eerily still. Not quiet in the usual peaceful sense, but in a way that made the floorboards seem louder beneath my feet. Every movement echoed. Every breath felt like a question waiting for an answer. Natalie sat at the kitchen island again. Same spot. Her eyes were swollen, face pale. She hadn't changed out of the red dress, though she'd pulled a sweater over it, like covering it could somehow erase what it meant. I sat down across from her. No small talk, no coffee, just silence and space filled with everything that needed to be said. I'm not looking for apologies, I said, my voice flat but not cruel. Apologies don't undo choices. What I want is clarity and a decision. She nodded slowly, like she'd been preparing herself for this moment since the minute she walked out of Amici. You have 2 options, I continued, hands folded on the counter. Option 1, you never contact Colton again. Not a message, not a glance. You agree to rebuild this marriage on my terms. Total transparency. And you sign a post-nuptial agreement that protects me entirely if you ever decide to go back on that promise. I paused to let it sink in. Option 2, you pack a bag, right now, and you walk out that door with nothing but the clothes you're wearing. No alimony, no split assets, Nothing. Natalie's hand shook slightly. She blinked hard, a tear spilling down her cheek. I choose you, she said. I choose our life. I'll do whatever it takes. I'm not interested in vows, I said, quieter now. I want action. If you mean it, then we do this my way. She nodded again. Your way. That afternoon, I called my lawyer. The post-nuptial agreement was airtight. Natalie read every clause without flinching. Full financial forfeiture in the event of future infidelity. Shared location tracking. Passwords disclosed. Monthly marriage counseling required. Non-negotiable. She signed it without a single protest. I watched her hand move across the paper, and I tried to feel triumphant, but all I felt was tired. The following months passed like slow-dripping water, uneven, sometimes maddening, sometimes oddly soothing. Natalie made good on her promise. She blocked Colton on every device, deleted the burner phone, showed me her messages, even when I didn't ask. Her efforts weren't performative. She didn't smile when she didn't feel like smiling. She let herself be raw, honest, ugly even. Trust, however, didn't return just because she said the right words. It rebuilt in pieces. Some days I wanted to reach for her. Others, I needed space. She never pushed. She listened, gave me room, cooked, sat with me in silence, showed up again and again. The therapy sessions helped, not in a fairy tale way that makes everything magically okay, but they gave us language, tools, a mirror we could look into together, even when the reflection was painful. I had moments when I'd catch myself watching her too closely, second-guessing a text notification, a pause in conversation, a new shirt. I hated it. Hated how paranoia had crept into the foundation of my instincts. But I never said anything. I just watched, stayed alert, quiet. Natalie never once asked for my forgiveness. She just kept trying. Nearly a year later, it was spring again. I came home one evening to find her waiting for me in the living room. She was sitting with both hands folded over her stomach, eyes wide and vulnerable. I'm pregnant, she said, the words tumbling out like she wasn't sure if they were a gift or a confession. I froze. I stared at her, the room spinning just slightly, then settling. Her voice had been steady, but her eyes searched mine like she didn't know what kind of man would be standing in front of her once the words landed. How far along? I asked after a long pause. 8 weeks, she whispered. I was waiting to be sure. I've seen the doctor. Everything looks good. I didn't move. I couldn't. So much happened in the space of that silence. I thought about the night she might have conceived. If it was after everything, if it was one of those nights where we were both trying, reaching for something lost. I thought about how a child would change everything, and yet, somehow, nothing at all. Then, slowly, I walked over and knelt beside her. I placed my hand over hers, both of us pressing lightly into the soft curve of her belly. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was something close to acceptance. This changes things, I said. She nodded, tears brimming. But it doesn't fix what's broken. We still have to keep going. Carefully. I know, she said. I'll never trust you the same way again, I added quietly. But maybe that's okay. Maybe the version of us that comes next doesn't need to look like the one before. I'll earn what I can, she whispered. Whatever that is. I nodded. Now, a year later, Natalie is 6 months pregnant. We've painted the spare room in pale gray and soft green. We talk names over dinner. Some nights she rests her head on my chest, and I feel the baby kick beneath my hand. And sometimes I still wake in the middle of the night, listening for lies in the silence. Sometimes I still wonder if I made the right choice by staying. But then I see the way she talks to our unborn child when she thinks I'm not listening. The way she folds tiny clothes with trembling hands. The way she keeps showing up, even when it would have been easier to walk away. And I realize, maybe the choice wasn't about her. Maybe it was about me. About choosing not to let someone else's betrayal rob me of the right to decide what my future looks like. About choosing strength in the form of quiet vigilance. Compassion with boundaries. Love, scarred but not broken. We are not what we were, but we're still here. And sometimes that's enough.